Distinguished participants, honorable guests, I feel privileged and honored to be able to address you today at this important meeting on the Macro Situation Annual Forum to discuss the role of China in the world today. As the title of our meeting suggests, this is the time of changing, reshaping, and development. Now, of course, it is impossible to speak about these features without a careful consideration of the role and policies of China. Importantly, China is very well aware of this. In the past few months, President Xi launched two major global initiatives. The first one, related to global development, was launched in September last year at the United Nations. The second one, on global security, was launched at the Boao Forum for Asia in April this year. Now, this is reassuring. As a major global power, China is aware of its responsibilities and is prepared to take bold initiatives. Now is the time to develop these initiatives into practical plans of action and to the necessary level of diplomatic activity. Admittedly, these are difficult tasks, and the circumstances are difficult. The COVID-19 pandemic is not yet over. A new wave of the pandemic is gaining strength in Europe and in many other parts of the world as we speak. The global economic recovery is slow and burdened with inflation. A widespread recession cannot be ruled out as yet. And the international security situation has deteriorated very seriously in the past few months. Now, I shall return to the issues of security towards the end of my remarks. But before that, I wish to address two types of fundamental issues of global development that require attention of our discussion. They are, first, the confluence of acute crisis of this moment, and second, the absence of effective global strategies to deal with the existential threats of global warming and lasting structural insecurities. Now, let me briefly address each of these two sets of issues separately. First, on the acute crisis. Today, the world is confronted with a confluence of food and energy crisis, both coinciding with a threatening international debt crisis. As the United Nations Secretary General has warned, taken together, this immediate crisis could in the near future push up to 1.7 billion of people into poverty, destitution, and hunger on a scale not seen in decades. Urgent actions are needed immediately, in particular with regard to the food crisis. Major countries holding grain stock reserves should release them onto international markets to dampen further price increases. Other urgent actions to ensure security of supplies should follow. Several activities of the international institutions and a number of governments are trying to respond to the global food crisis already. The Global Alliance for Food Security, supported by the World Bank, is one of them. The Food and Agriculture Resilience Mission is another. But more needs to be done, and all international actors should be engaged. Our meeting today could contribute additional ideas. The other acute crisis relates to the international finances, characterized by the growing burden of unsustainable debt of developing countries. Bold and effective responses are called for. A preemptive multilateral debt restructuring and debt relief initiatives should be considered. The existing mechanisms, such as the Debt Service Suspension Initiative for 2021 and the Common Framework for Debt Treatment, have to be reviewed. These are complex tasks. The issues of debt servicing and debt management include both public and private creditors. Until now, the focus of attention was almost exclusively placed on the official bilateral creditors, excluding private creditors who today hold the largest share of developing country debt. The future arrangements will have to include both public and private creditors in an effort to prevent large-scale defaults. It will be important for our meeting today to comment on these issues and to explore the ways forward, in particular keeping in mind the expectations of the G20 summit in November this year in Bali, in Indonesia. Second set of issues is different. More needs to be done to the problems that are emerging before our eyes. A perfect long storm is emerging. There is hardly any need to remind ourselves of the dangers of climate change and shrinking biodiversity, polluted oceans and spreading of infectious diseases. Existential global commons are deteriorating rapidly. And the risks implicit in deepening income disparities are growing, both within and especially across countries. Now, all this calls for a fundamental rethinking of policies and, importantly, for investing in global public goods. The world has to invest at much higher levels over a sustained period of time in the global public goods. And the time to design the necessary instruments, including in particular financial instruments, is now. To fund the necessary change, it will be necessary to devise public-private collaboration at levels never exercised before. Public finance should be reoriented so as to mobilize private investment to meet the needs of global commons. The public sector should be proactive and help designing new frameworks of risk sharing with private sector. International financial institutions will also have a critical role. This would not necessarily require a complete reconstruction of multilateral institutions. However, it would require new mandates to create global financial safety net, ideally through IMF, and importantly, to place global public goods at the core of development financing of the World Bank and development banks more generally. All these tasks represent a very tall order, but there is more. In addressing these tasks, it is essential to develop a genuine, human-centered approach. The requirement to leave no one behind is not an empty slogan. It is a vital condition for the future of humankind. The proposed World Social Summit of the United Nations in 2025 should be the turning point, and the preparations should start now. Now, all these tasks will require strong multilateral cooperation. Genuine cooperation is needed. The current prevalence of competition and confrontation does not help. Cooperation must become the order of the day. But we live in an era when cooperation is in a particularly short supply. Today, the expected problems of recovery and of vitally important investment in global public goods are compounded by the rising threats to peace and security. The world is at the foothills of a new Cold War. We live in a very dangerous situation. Much more needs to be done to stop the ongoing armed conflicts, in particular the war in Ukraine, and to curb the incipient arms race. We must have no illusions. Without global peace, there will be no resilient and inclusive recovery, nor meaningful multilateralism or better future for the humankind. Therefore, international peace and security must be a top priority for international leaders. In my opinion, the world needs a set of serious political efforts for the relaxation of tensions among the major powers. This is the time to start injecting a spirit of détente, relaxation of tensions among the major powers of the world. History, both recent and more distant, has known the periods of détente. Some have succeeded and others not. But one thing is clear. Success in managing relations among the main powers and the relaxation of tensions among them helped the world to prosper. Failure led to wars and regression. China has consistently advocated peaceful cooperation as a way to establish win-win outcomes and better common future for the humankind. I hope that further action on this basis will follow with the necessary imagination and persistence that will lead to success. I thank you for your attention.